It was supposed to be a normal Tuesday night. Ava had just finished a long shift at the hospital, 12 hours on her feet, barely a break, hair tied back, scrubs still smelling like antiseptic. The only thing on her mind was getting home, microwaving leftovers, and collapsing into bed before her 8 a.m. class. She barely noticed the flashing lights behind her until it was too late. Heart skipping, she pulled over on the side of a quiet road. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her license and registration. Like every woman who's ever been alone at night, there was a flicker of fear, but she told herself to stay calm. This was probably just a routine stop. The officer walked up slowly, his flashlight flicking into her window. "You in a hurry tonight?" he asked, casually, almost with a smirk. "No, sir," Ava said, keeping her voice steady. "Was I speeding?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked her up and down, not in a way that felt official, but in a way that made her skin crawl. "Not exactly," he said. "Just figured I'd check in. You looked a little stressed." Ava forced a polite smile. "Just tired. Long shift." He asked a few more questions, about where she worked, if she lived nearby, if she was single. She laughed awkwardly, trying to brush it off, but something in his tone made it clear. This wasn't about a traffic violation. Then came the moment she would replay 100 times. "You ever go out with a cop?" he asked, half joking, but not really. Ava's stomach sank. She shook her head. "No, I haven't." He tilted his head, waiting. She added, "I'm not really looking to date right now." The air shifted. His smile faded. "Right," he said flatly. "Well, drive safe." She watched in the rearview mirror as he walked back to his car, but he didn't drive off right away. He just sat there, lights still flashing, until she pulled away. And in that moment, she didn't know it yet, but saying no to that question would cost her everything. Before any of this, Ava was the kind of woman people described as driven. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, focused. 26 years old, balancing a full course load in nursing school while working overnight shifts at a downtown hospital. She didn't have the luxury of being careless, not when rent was due, not when her mum still depended on her back home, not when she was the first in her family to get this close to a degree. Her world was simple, but demanding. Wake up, study, work, repeat. She didn't go out much, barely dated. Her life wasn't exciting, but it was hers. A routine carved out of survival, not comfort. Her friends joked that she was married to her future, always too busy chasing stability to stop for anything else. And honestly, Ava liked it that way. She had goals. She had plans. She had 3 semesters left before graduating and becoming a registered nurse. She already had a job lined up after school. All she had to do was keep her head down, stay focused, and avoid unnecessary drama. That's what made everything that happened so unbelievable. Because when she told people what happened later, the arrest, the humiliation, the way the system turned on her, they didn't get it. They looked at her like she must have done something. Like no woman just gets arrested for turning down a date. Like she had to be hiding something. But that's the part that stings the most. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't messy. She didn't have secrets. She was just a hard-working black woman trying to make it through her 20s, and she said no to the wrong man, a man in uniform, with a badge, and a bruised ego. And after that, he made sure she paid for it. It was a Wednesday evening when Ava saw him again. She had just clocked out of her shift and was driving home along the same stretch of road where the first traffic stop happened. The streetlights buzzed above her, casting a dull orange glow across the empty lanes. It was late, nearly midnight, the kind of hour when the world goes quiet and your mind finally exhales. That's when she saw the headlights behind her, closer, following. Her stomach sank. Same car, same spotlight, same officer. At first, she thought maybe it was coincidence, but then he flashed his lights, pulled her over again, second time, in 1 week. She rolled down her window slowly, hands already shaking. The officer strolled up like they were old friends. "Evening again," he said, his voice too casual. Your taillight's out. Ava blinked. I just had my car inspected last month. Everything passed. He shrugged. Well, it's out now. She wanted to challenge it. Ask him to show her. Record it. Something. But instead, she sat there frozen, because part of her already knew. This wasn't about the taillight. This was about her no. He handed her a ticket without another word. It wasn't the money that stung. It was the smirk he gave her. The power in it. Like he knew she wouldn't fight back. Like he knew she couldn't. When she drove off, she pulled into a gas station to check the taillight. She turned on the car, got out, and walked behind it. Both lights? Perfectly fine. She stood there under the flickering lights of the station, heart pounding, breath catching in her throat. That's when it hit her. This wasn't about a ticket. It was a warning. He knew where she worked. He knew her route home. And he had no intention of letting her walk away from his rejection without consequences. He wasn't just watching. He was hunting. It was a Saturday afternoon when she saw him again. This time, off duty. Ava was standing in line at the local grocery store, clutching a small basket with just a few items: eggs, oatmeal, coffee. Her headphones were in, podcast playing, trying to decompress from a brutal week. She turned slightly to grab something from a nearby shelf, and there he was. The cop. He wasn't in uniform, just jeans, a hoodie, and that same smug look on his face, as if they shared some kind of private joke, like he still expected her to play along. Hey there, he said, loud enough to make her pull her earbuds out. She blinked, startled. Hi. You ignoring me now? He asked, smiling, but not in a friendly way. I'm just grabbing groceries, she replied cautiously, trying to get home. He stepped closer. You never called me back. She didn't even have his number. She never asked for it. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Ava said, voice careful. I'm not interested. I wasn't then, and I'm not now. There, she said it. Clear, firm, respectful, no games. But the second the words left her mouth, something in his eyes changed. The charm evaporated. His jaw clenched slightly. His smile faded. It was like flipping a switch. Right, he muttered. Got it. He walked away. No scene. No yelling. But somehow, that was worse. She stood frozen in that aisle for a few seconds, trying to calm the storm of panic bubbling in her chest. She knew what she saw in his face. Resentment, embarrassment, a quiet kind of rage. The kind that doesn't explode, but simmers. The kind that plans. And that night, Ava couldn't sleep. She double-checked the locks on her doors, drew the curtains shut, charged her phone beside her bed just in case. Something was coming. She didn't know when or how, but she could feel it, like thunder rumbling far off in the distance. She had every right to say no. But in his world, that no had consequences. At first, Ava tried to convince herself it was all in her head. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe he just happened to be nearby. Maybe this would all blow over. But the next incident shattered every doubt. It was a week later. She was leaving campus after a long day of lectures, juggling her backpack and a half-empty coffee cup, when she spotted the same patrol car parked across the street, engine off, headlights dark, just sitting there, watching. Her heart dropped. She tried to ignore it, quickened her pace to her car, and drove off without looking back. But the next day, he was there again, same time, same spot, just waiting. Then came another ticket, this time for parking too close to a fire hydrant, even though she'd parked in the campus lot, like she always did. The ticket didn't even have the right address. She started getting called into her supervisor's office, at the hospital. Someone reported an issue with your attitude, they said. A patient complained you were short with them. No names, no details, just vague warnings. She began to feel like she was under surveillance, every move questioned, every moment tainted with doubt. Then it got worse. One evening, As she walked out to her car after her shift, she noticed something shoved under her windshield wiper, a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it slowly, pulse racing. Just one line, written in blocky, angry handwriting. "You think you're better than me?" No name, no signature, but she knew. That night, she cried in her car for nearly an hour, parked in a gas station parking lot, because she didn't feel safe driving home. She called her mum, tried to explain everything, but how do you explain that you're being hunted by a cop? Someone with power, with protection, who knows exactly how far he can go without crossing a visible line. That's when it really hit her. She wasn't being paranoid. This was personal. And now, it was just beginning. Ava started changing her routes. She left work through different exits, parked in crowded lots, took the long way home, but no matter what she did, he always found her. He was in the background now. Not always obvious, not always close, but there. A parked patrol car across the street from her apartment, a shadow in her rearview mirror for just a little too long. A man in uniform standing too close at the gas station, pretending to look at snacks. At first, she told herself it was coincidence, but deep down, she knew better. She tried to stay focused. Classes were picking up. Clinical rotations were starting. She had patients to care for, exams to study for. She pushed through, holding on to the version of her life before all this, before she became afraid to leave her house. But it was like he was peeling away her life, piece by piece. One morning, her professor pulled her aside after class. "Ava, are you okay?" he asked gently. "You've missed 2 assignments. You're usually on top of everything." She hadn't even realized she'd missed them. Her brain felt foggy all the time. She couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about that folded note on her windshield, the look on his face in the grocery store, the second traffic stop, the tickets, the stares. Then came the warning from her job. "There have been complaints," her supervisor said, looking uncomfortable. "A few reports of unprofessional behavior. You've seemed distracted." Distracted? She was being stalked by a man with a gun and a badge, but there was no space for that in a workplace form. No one ever asked why. They just took notes, issued warnings, watched her sink. She started missing shifts, calling out sick. She was terrified to go to the police. What would she even say? "Hi, I'm being harassed by one of your own," and he's smart enough not to leave a trail. The worst part? He hadn't even laid a hand on her. Not officially. No bruises. No broken windows. Just a slow, calculated erasure of her peace, her job, her education, her entire sense of safety. And Ava couldn't prove any of it. One day she came home to find her apartment door unlocked. Nothing was missing. No signs of forced entry. Just the door, slightly open, like someone had been inside. Like someone wanted her to know they could be. She sat on her living room floor that night and cried until her body went numb. She didn't call the cops. What would be the point? She just changed the locks, again, and realized something terrifying. She wasn't losing control of her life. It was being taken from her, one silent, invisible act at a time. It happened on a Thursday night. Ava was finally starting to believe the worst might be behind her. It had been quiet for almost 2 weeks. No strange sightings, no new tickets, no late-night knocks on her door. She let herself exhale, just a little. Maybe he got bored. Maybe it was over. She spent the evening cleaning her apartment, folding laundry, watching a show on her laptop with the volume low. Her phone buzzed around 9:30 p.m. An unknown number. She didn't answer. 10 minutes later, there was a loud knock at the door. She froze. 3 more knocks, this time harder. Then a voice. "Ava Thompson? Open up. This is the police." Her stomach dropped. She opened the door slowly, cautiously, and there he was. The same officer, but this time, he wasn't alone. Another officer stood beside him. One Ava didn't recognize. He had a clipboard in hand. The first officer didn't even look at her, just turned away as the second one stepped forward. "We have a warrant for your arrest," he said, almost apologetically. Ava blinked. "What?" For what? Obstruction of justice, he read from the paper. Failure to comply with a lawful order during a traffic stop. You're being taken into custody tonight. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Her body felt like it wasn't her own. This has to be a mistake, she whispered. I've done nothing wrong. We can talk about it downtown, the officer said. Before she could process what was happening, they were reading her rights, cuffing her wrists, walking her down the hallway like she was dangerous. Her neighbors peeked through cracked doors. She kept her head down, cheeks burning with shame she didn't deserve. At the station, she was fingerprinted, mugshot taken, left to sit in a cold, fluorescent-lit holding cell in silence. Hours passed. She asked to speak to someone. No one gave her answers. They told her the paperwork was processing. She asked again about the charge, what order she had supposedly disobeyed. They just repeated the same words over and over. It's in the system. By the time she was released on bail the next morning, the damage had already been done. Her phone was full of missed calls. Her job had already been notified. Her school would find out next. Her name was already in a public arrest record online. And that cop? He wasn't there to see her walk out. But she knew he was smiling somewhere. Because this wasn't about the law. This was about power. And now, Ava had a record for saying no. When Ava got home after the arrest, everything felt different. Her apartment wasn't just a place to sleep anymore. It was a crime scene in her own mind. The same walls she used to feel safe inside now felt like they were closing in. She hadn't done anything wrong, but somehow she still felt contaminated, like the system had rubbed its hands all over her life and left invisible fingerprints behind. She stood in the shower for nearly an hour, scrubbing her skin raw, but nothing could wash off the memory of those cuffs, the camera flash, the cold silence of a jail cell. That night, she didn't sleep. By the next morning, her name had already surfaced on local arrest logs, just a line of text on a website. No context, no explanation. Just her name, her charge, and the word obstruction. Anyone who saw it would assume she resisted, fought back, caused a scene. She didn't. But the world didn't care about the truth, just the headline. The first real punch came when her supervisor at the hospital called. "I'm sorry, Ava," he said, his voice tense. "We're going to have to place you on immediate leave until this is resolved. Patients can't be under the care of someone with an active charge on their record." She tried to explain. He cut her off gently. "I don't need the details. HR's already involved." She hung up and sat in silence for an hour. Then came the email from her university. "Dear Ava Thompson, due to the recent legal developments reflected in your background report, we must notify you that your enrollment status is under review pending a conduct hearing." They hadn't even asked for her side of the story. No warning, no questions, just another door slamming shut. Her friends started pulling back too. The text slowed, calls stopped, some sent quick, thinking of you messages, but none really stuck around. No one wanted to be involved in something messy. No one wanted to challenge a system that made someone like Ava the villain. She couldn't blame them. The worst part wasn't even the arrest. It was how fast everyone turned their back on her. She wasn't Ava, the student, the caregiver, the future nurse anymore. She was Ava the accused. Ava the girl who must have done something. Ava the problem. Her job, her degree, her reputation, her peace, all shattered. Not because she broke a law, but because she bruised a man's ego. And in the eyes of the system, that was apparently enough. For weeks, Ava didn't leave the apartment. She barely ate, barely slept. The woman who once juggled 12-hour shifts and night classes now struggled to get out of bed. The silence in her home was loud. Emails from school went unread. Bills piled up. Her future, once so clear, now felt unreachable, like a dream someone had stolen right out of her hands. But one morning, something shifted. She saw a post online, a story about another woman. Different city, different cop, but the same pattern. Power, retaliation, silence. It hit too close to home. And for the first time since her arrest, Ava didn't feel alone. She felt angry. She opened her laptop and started typing. She wrote everything down, every moment, every ticket, every conversation, every time she felt followed or watched. She printed her hospital shift records, dug through her school emails, saved voicemail timestamps, and pulled footage from her building's hallway cameras. Then she made one call. Not to the police. To a civil rights attorney. Her hands shook as she spoke. Her voice cracked. But the lawyer listened, and she believed her. "You're not the first," the lawyer said quietly. "But if you're ready to fight, I'll stand with you." It was the first time Ava felt like someone saw her as more than just a case file. They started small. A formal complaint against the officer. A Freedom of Information request for his body cam footage and patrol logs. They filed paperwork, made noise, pushed through the red tape. And when the department didn't respond fast enough, they went public. Ava shared her story in a video. Just her face. No frills. No dramatics. She spoke softly, clearly, her pain woven into every word. "I was arrested for saying no. I did nothing wrong, and I'm not the only one." Within days, the clip went viral. Women flooded the comments with their own stories. Quiet retaliation, intimidation, men in power who couldn't take rejection, the system that always looked the other way. Ava became a symbol, not by choice, but by necessity. The officer was placed on temporary leave. The department launched an internal review. Reporters started calling. Podcasts reached out. People were finally listening. And Ava, she wasn't healed. Not yet. But she was fighting. And for the first time in months, she felt like she was standing upright again, even if the ground still felt shaky. Because this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every woman who'd been punished for setting a boundary. And Ava was done staying quiet. Ava's story was never just hers. What happened to her, the abuse, the retaliation, the silence, it didn't start with her, and it didn't end with her either. As her video spread across social media, the comments section became a confession booth. Thousands of women shared stories that sounded eerily similar. A boss who started scheduling them for fewer shifts after turning him down. A professor who failed them after rejecting a drink to talk about grades. A police officer who lingered too long during a traffic stop, who found excuses to keep showing up. Some were subtle, some were violent. Most never made it past a whisper. Because women are trained to move on, to stay quiet, to pick their battles. And when the man who hurts you wears a badge, silence doesn't feel like weakness. It feels like survival. That's the truth Ava had been living in. A truth that's woven into the daily lives of women everywhere. That saying no can be dangerous. That dignity can be mistaken for defiance. That power, when placed in the wrong hands, becomes a weapon, and the system will almost always protect the one holding it. Even after Ava's story went public, the accountability didn't come fast. Her charges weren't dropped overnight. There were no apologies. The officer's record stayed clean while hers remained stained. But the public pressure made it harder to ignore. Journalists started asking questions the department didn't want to answer. Why was she arrested for obstruction over a routine stop with no body cam footage? Why were her multiple complaints ignored? Why was the officer allowed to continue working cases involving women? No one had answers, just red tape and vague PR statements. But Ava's story had already lit a fuse. Local women's advocacy groups began pushing for independent oversight of police misconduct cases involving abuse of power. A petition calling for the officer's suspension gained thousands of signatures in days. Students at her university organized a walkout to support her reinstatement. Ava watched it all unfold with a mix of disbelief and quiet grief. Because while the momentum was real, her scars were, too. She had lost months of peace, lost job opportunities, almost lost her education. And for what? For setting a boundary. For daring to say, "No, I'm not interested." In any other context, that would have been the end of it. But when the man who hears that no wears a uniform, the rules change, and the consequences become devastating. Still, Ava kept showing up. Every interview, every meeting, every lawyer consultation, because her voice, cracked and weary as it sometimes was, had become a lifeline for women who had never dared to speak. And maybe she didn't get justice, not the kind that comes in a courtroom, but she got something else. She got the truth into the light. What happened to Ava should never happen to anyone, but it does, quietly, constantly, and without consequence. If you're watching this, and you've ever felt unsafe saying no, or silenced by someone in power, you are not alone. Ava's story is a reminder that sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do is survive, and then speak. So tell us, how many stories like this never get told? How many women are still afraid to say no? If this made you feel something, share it, comment, tag someone. Don't let Ava's fight be forgotten. Let it be the beginning